Thank you. Good morning, everybody. My internet may be a little unstable. I'm sorry. I'll try to move quickly. Wanted to say that, we've been open now for 2 weeks at Cargo. We're doing limited 4 days a week by appointment with a 20-person maximum in the store at the time. Even though our square footage can handle quite a bit more per the guidelines, we've decided to go with a much smaller group just for our own personal security and our management of what's needed. So far, we've found it really lovely. Most of our customers have been very understanding, but we found it to be very work intensive, just making sure that we have reached out to everybody, make sure that they're masked. We're giving out gloves for everybody so that we don't have to go through behind and disinfect every single thing they have. Yet there's many, many things that the customers are engaging with that we're trying to figure out how to either quarantine after they've touched it or tried it on or used it, or disinfect. For instance, jewelry. One of our vendors has purchased a medical grade UV light sanitizer for the jewelry. So a lot of what we've done through figuring out what other people are doing and through forums like Bricks Need Mortar and other just one-on-one business to business talks about what are you doing? How long are you quarantining and close afterwards? Do you think you have to steam stuff? What do you think you need to do? And I think one of the challenges for us all is that we are figuring out as we're going along, and that from a state and city perspective, nobody seems real comfortable saying this is the standard of what you should do for perhaps liability reasons, but it also leaves us out there feeling a little unsure of what we should do, which is also leading to a lot of consumer confusion. And ultimately, my concern is that their lack of confidence in what it looks like is going to affect how we're doing business long-term. So I would say if there's anything that we can do to get unification of how each sector is dealing with things, groups sharing what they're doing and getting to a place where what they're sharing on their social media or their posted signage when they come in, so that a customer comes to a place and knows what to expect, it would be really helpful. The other thing I would say is that in retail specifically, the rollout happened as we know, not very gracefully, with not much notice. So the opening is not rolled out where we, all came out with the same sign and the same policy. It's happened haphazardly, and so a lot of retailers feel very much like they're the guinea pigs to what retail or what opening looks like on a larger scale. And to that, I would say everyone still has big questions and needs around how to provide public restrooms. So if we could get any oversight specific to public restroom use, and I really trying to be working on what can we do to harness resources so that we can make bulk buys and save everybody a little bit. If everybody needed to get, a hands-free faucet for their sink, and there's, 2 or 3 styles that some provider could give us a great price on, it would be a huge relief, not only to know they existed and we weren't be fighting each other on Amazon in the 11th hour to get the best price on the thing, but actually that we were proactive and did it and knew what to do to open our bathrooms again. I can't tell you how many people walk into the store and beg me for a bathroom, and there's no place in town. It's like we're in Manhattan. There's no place to go. So, we've spent, I think, $600 on the preparedness stuff that we need so far, the signs, the dots, the plexiglass shields, and we're still not there. And so just really anything that we can do, on a larger level, same types of buys, more unification and more, city, state condoned practices would be so helpful. That's my 2 cents. Thank you.
That's great.
Thanks, Bridgid. We actually had a cancellation on one of our businesses that I know I have several other businesses on this call that we've talked to a lot during this time. I don't want to put anybody on, let me just see here. I don't want to have anybody feel uncomfortable about me calling on them, but oh, Michelle, yes, Michelle, I would love to hear from you. Michelle has a business right across from Revolution Hall, actually.
Hi. Let me shut the door. My husband is grinding more coffee. Just a sec.
Okay, well, while we're waiting for that. Oh, good. And then we're going to go over to Art Fortuna after that from Vibrant Table.
So I'm Michelle Schwegman. My husband and I have the Herbivore Clothing Company, which is across from Rev Hall at the Vegan Mini Mall. We've been closed since March 13th, and we opened last Friday. So we've been open, we're opening for 5 days, for 5 hours each day. We used to be open 7 days a week. And we kind of didn't really even announce it because we were concerned that there would be too many people. But I echo what Bridgid was saying. You know, we felt like we had to come up with our own guidelines, and which we did. And we are opting to be really strict with what we're doing. So we're only allowing the maximum of 2 people in our store. We're taking everybody's names and phone numbers and emails just in case someone in my store gets sick. So we know who's been there, that we can let them know. We're making everyone sanitize their hands when they walk in. We have gloves. They have to have a mask. And so far, everything has been fine. It's everyone that comes in makes a purchase because they know it's kind of, you know, you have to go through that whole process to be let in. But it is stressful for our employee, and we have such a small space that we really can only, you know, that's why we have limited hours. We have things we have to do online with shipping and stuff like that. So we can't have someone shipping and have the store be open because there would be too many people in all at the same time. So just managing that, you know, who can come in when and how many bodies can be in the store and how long do they stay, and you're paying people to wait on people that might not buy anything. It's just, it's all very, you know, we don't really know on a day-to-day basis how it's going to go. So today's our 3rd day that we'll be open, and you know, it feels good to have the store cleaned up and be ready for the public again, but it's still it makes everybody a little bit nervous, just because you never know what it's going to look like on a day-to-day basis. And then the other issue that we have where we're located is that we really feel that we have to have our door locked. We can't have our door just open because there's a lot of traffic with houseless people, and just kind of, you know, there's a lot of the street that's, we have to be careful to keep my workers safe. They can't be in the back and have the front door open. So we you know, the whole idea of being out on the sidewalk and doing business outside, that just doesn't work on Stark, you know, on Stark Street. It just doesn't, it's not, we'd have to have someone sitting outside all day long with any kind of merchandise, and that just isn't something that's pleasant for anybody. So, but that's how we're doing.
All right, thank you so much, Michelle. We're going to go over to Art Fortuna from Vibrant Table, who's on both of our boards for the Central Eastside Together and CEIC.
Hello, good morning. Thank you all for providing this opportunity. I have a catering and event business, and we have a building on Southeast 8th, and we've got venues. We have a very large space. We have a 5,000 square foot event space, and we have an outdoor area that's fenced in and is part of that event space. It's probably another 2,000 square feet of paved, contained space. We're struggling because, you know, essentially there's been no event business. We've, you know, since March, mid-March, it's just disappeared. as you can imagine, when it's saying if you don't gather more than 10 people, if you do, you're going to die. That's probably a pretty deterrent to people coming and doing events. So, but we think there's opportunities to come back, and we're confused because there's certain rules regarding restaurants and saying you can do an event up to 25 people in your backyard. You can do family gatherings, you can do small weddings, but our venues are not allowed to do events. We have space that could very easily accommodate and probably much more safely accommodate groups of 25 for flow through, and we have much more space. We can do much more separation of tables. We can have egress and exits managed much more effectively. We can have bathrooms. We have bathrooms that have adequate space and hallways that have adequate room, all those things, but yet we are not technically allowed to be open and offer that sale, to a person who wants to do a picnic party or a wedding in an outdoor space, because we're a venue. This is at least how we interpret it. And I think this is the challenge, is there's no place to go and ask someone specifically, here's my floor plan, here's my design, can I do an event? And how come I can't? Or the general information is no, you can't. So we really would like to have a contact person, some sort of consistency of how are these things going to be enforced? What are they looking for? If we have this much square feet and we can do the design of tables and flow to where we can accommodate safely these things, we'd like to have those pre-approved if possible, so that we can then build the confidence back in the customer to say it's okay for you to plan your wedding or you to plan your family gathering, and we have the space and the accommodations to do it, rather than us having to come in or you having to do something in your backyard. We can do this in our space. So that's my that's the gist of my thing, questions and concerns, and who do I speak to, who do I talk to get this guidance?
Kate, do you mind if I just respond briefly? Hi, Art. This is Rayhana. I'm the Governor's Regional Solutions Team Lead for the Metro region, covering Clackamas, Multnomah, and Washington counties. Thank you for your comments. I just want to clarify that now that Multnomah County is in phase 1, and if your businesses are located in Multnomah County, you can hold gatherings of up to 25 people in your venue space, so long as there's physical distancing, and you adhere to sort of the employer guidelines. So just wanted to clarify that. And then if you have any follow-up questions, I'm always happy to be a resource to you. I don't think we're, reviewing any specific proposals or plans, but I can help sort of just provide information or triage. So I'll put my contact information in the chat box.
Thank you. That would be fantastic. And that's just the fact that you say we can do it. It's been a very debate within our company, my staff, the debate as to whether we can or we can't. We've got clients who have asked to use the space and we've been holding off. So that's good. Thank you.
It's Jeff Martin from Multnomah County. I can also have Shannon Fost, your area inspector, contact you too, who does your health inspections, and she can help you walk through those things and go over your site plan.
Perfect. Thank you. I will make sure my contact information is also available. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Art. I think we're going to move to the next part of our agenda, because I do see that we have our key representative, Marc Jolin, from the Joint Office of House of Services. And Marc, I asked Marc to actually give us just kind of an update about what's in place right now in terms of houseless services, if there have been any lack of services due to COVID. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Marc. Marc, are you there?
I am. Good morning.
Great, thank you.
So thanks for the opportunity to be here. So I am with the Joint Office of Homeless Services for the City of Portland and Multnomah County, and I'll try to be brief and leave space for questions. So since the onset of COVID, we've done a number of things to try to address the fact that a lot of the basic services for people experiencing unsheltered homelessness in particular have not been available. So it's the closure of the libraries and the community centers, the fact that people are no longer able to redeem bottles, that a number of programs have had to scale back because they didn't have volunteers or the ability to continue service at the normal level. All of that has had a particular impact on people unsheltered, and a recognition that there's clear guidance from public health around how to minimize the transmission risk for unsheltered people. But implementing that guidance required supplies and resources that many folks don't have. And so at the very beginning in March, we opened a supply center in downtown Portland, began coordinating with outreach teams, both outreach teams that we fund through the Joint Office and many that we don't, who are community-led, kind of community volunteer type programs, just to get the basic information around COVID-19 out to people, to get personal protective equipment into the field, providing sort of basic safety supports. If you have two people sleeping in a tent and one of them is symptomatic, obviously you need to have two separate sleeping spaces. So we began providing, in partnership with our nonprofits, tents and sleeping bags and tarps and blankets. For a while there, hand warmers were in big demand. And we've continued that. So that supply station, we can continue to resupply it with the help of our Emergency Operations Center. And we've got some 50 different organizations that are coming there. It's staffed 5 days a week, coming there to pick up whatever supplies they need and get them out. We've also distributed sort of infrared thermometers to outreach teams, because we want the engagement to also include a symptoms check as much as possible. Because part of our response has been helping ensure that anybody who shows up symptomatic with COVID-like conditions has the opportunity to go into what is essentially a COVID recuperative motel setting that I'll talk about in a minute. Over the course of the last several months, in addition to the basic supplies, because food access has become a real challenge, and water access, especially in outlying areas of the county, we've been in partnership with Lincoln High School and a number of other community groups, getting essentially sack lunches, thousands of sack lunches out through outreach teams to outlying areas, and then recognizing that Blanchet House and St. Francis, some of our core meal providers, are really struggling with the additional demand for their services and the costs associated with moving to an all kind of to-go model. We've been investing financial resources there as well. So that's on the unsheltered side, and I think you're all aware that as part of that, the City of Portland has stood down on moving encampments, understanding that keeping people in place is beneficial to reducing the spread of COVID-19. So there haven't been camp cleanups in the traditional way in a number of months, other than in sort of really emergent circumstances. And then the city's also put in place a large number of sort of hygiene stations, and I think 50 some parks have their restrooms open 24/7. So a number of efforts made to also increase hygiene access, understanding that that's a major challenge for folks who are outside. Then on the sheltering side of things, very clear early on that in particular our large congregate shelters were presented a real significant risk of outbreak, and given the large number of people that we have in our emergency shelters who have the underlying conditions, are older, that put them at risk for really severe consequences and even fatalities from COVID infection, we knew that we needed to figure out how to put social distancing in place in those shelter settings. And so we worked with the Parks Department, with Metro, to essentially redistribute principally our adult shelter, but also our youth shelter, which is a congregate setting, to redistribute those beds across multiple sites, so that in every single congregate site, we had at least 6 feet of space for sleeping. And in addition to that, a lot more space for eating, fewer people accessing the bathrooms and showers so that they could be more readily cleaned on a regular basis. So not just sleeping separately, but really making those congregate settings safer for everybody who's there. And then staffing them and providing support on site to really monitor for symptoms. Because again, just like in the encampments, part of our strategy has been to get anybody who's showing symptoms out of those settings as quickly as possible and into a recuperative environment. The city of Portland in our office added about a month and a half ago or 2 months ago now, in addition to the internal physical distancing shelters, the 3 outdoor sites, 2 of which are in CEIC, that Join is operating in partnership with a coalition. And those are set up very much with the same sort of public health guidance in mind around allowing people to physically distance, have access to hygiene and food service that is as safe as it can be under the circumstances. And then the last piece, and then I'll stop, is the recuperative settings. Early on, we recognized that we needed a place for people experiencing homelessness, whether they were in encampments, in a congregate shelter setting, or even in one of our non-congregate settings, a domestic violence shelter, a family shelter, a transitional housing program, to go if they showed symptoms so that they wouldn't be running the risk of exposing others. We have 2 of those sites. One of them is also in CEIC. You're familiar with the Jupiter Hotel. There's a second site a little bit further east. Combined, it's 120 rooms of space, and those sites are 24/7 staffed. Meals are provided. You have on-site medical supports. We're taking people there who are symptomatic or have tested positive, and it allows them the time to recuperate and before going back to a congregate setting. Over time, we've expanded access into those to other people, including those not experiencing homelessness who need isolation. This was part of the governor's order for reopening, is that there needs to be a place for people to isolate if they're COVID positive. Those hotels are serving that as part of that response as well. So that's what has been happening. And what we're in the process of now, which you may have heard, is transitioning those physical distancing sites, which are still congregate sites, to motel settings, and then prioritizing those people in our overall shelter system who are at highest risk based on their underlying risk factors of a severe or fatal consequence from COVID into motel rooms. And so we're in the process of that. We've opened one, we're getting ready to do the second, and our hope is that we'll have several more coming for a total of about 300 rooms. So that is my update on what we have been doing on the homeless response side, and I'm happy to take any questions that you may have.
Hey, Marc, thank you so much, Marc, for joining us today. And I see that you're in your car, doing your multitasking is always so very much appreciated. A couple of questions in the chat, one from Michelle. What is the recommended place to call now if there's a houseless person outside of the store?
I will also just give a plug for some of our Central Eastside Together programs too. We do have outreach workers that are able to respond upon dispatch. They have all had trauma-informed training, and we also have our safety for all ambassadors. Nyla put the link to the services there. They actually have been delivering some of those meals that Marc talked about, and have been working with the joint office on outreach during this time. And I'll put that over to you.
About 15 meals a day. Thank you, Marc, for all the work your team's doing. It's been really impressive.
And thank you. And I think that—
Marc, yeah, maybe somebody else on the call too, but yeah, there's a question about what to do if there's a houseless person outside of the actual location.
So I guess partly it depends on if the goal is to connect them to services because there's a concern for their welfare or they have a need. I actually think Central Eastside has, because of the outreach teams that the Central Eastside employs, that's a pretty good resource and to deploy in that particular situation. Catholic Charities also has an outreach program that is active in Central Eastside, but I think working with the Northwest Enforcement outreach workers is probably the best bet in terms of getting outreach response. And I think I'm sorry, Kate, I don't remember exactly what the more public safety side of that group is called right now, but if it's more about the person causing a problem for the business and asking for help having them move, that may be that sort of private security side of the house that can do that. Unless there's something really egregious going on, those are not high priority calls for police, for example, right now. Just unwanted person calls are given everything that's going on. My understanding, and the Bureau might be on this call, I don't know, but I don't think.
Robert King is on the call.
What's that?
Robert King is on the call. And,
oh, Robert's on the call.
Is saying that he can also answer questions too, and about safety issues. Our policy really is that we do not move anyone physically. If we do have a waiver from the business and someone is on their property, we can ask them to leave, but we do not move anyone physically. And if you really feel that your life is a threat, you should call police.
All right. We also had a question from Bridgid. Marc, can you tell us how the Water Ave camps work? Are they full? How are people allowed to join the camps, and how long will the camps be there?
So my understanding is that the camps are relatively full. There's always going to be some transition. I don't know how many spots are currently available in each of those two. The ramp up process took some time. Join was really trying to be intentional around ensuring equitable access into those sites. And so it was going through an intentional outreach process and application process. So that meant it took a while to get them ramped up. But my understanding is that they're essentially fully operational now. The method of operation, it's a very interesting model. It's not something that we've ever tried before. We've had sort of all what I would describe as self-governed sites like Right to Dream, where there are no paid staff on site at all. It's really fully operated by folks who are resident there, but not as staff. And then, of course, we've had our traditional shelters that are staffed by non-residents. Here you have a hybrid where the site is actually staffed by a combination of residents and folks not resident there, all of whom are getting paid. And so and there is self-governance there, but with an overlay of organizational support, especially on the HR and administrative side from Join. So it's been a really, it's a learning experience for us, and a good one. And it's a little early still. I mean, we're still sort of meeting and talking about quality improvement and how it's working, what aspects of that work well, and which ones we may need to tweak over time. But in terms of longevity, my understanding is that the city is committed to keeping them open for the duration of the declared state of emergency. I think the longer term sort of vision for those is still emerging and will depend on sort of the lessons learned and how effective those sites can be in meeting the needs that they're set up to serve. But I think it's been an important kind of innovation in how we're trying to do sheltering as part of this COVID response.
And Marc, and also just a personal question for me, is your office or anywhere else in the city considering additional camps anywhere in the city?
There is a lot of discussion about that right now, and there have been a number of neighborhood organizations that have expressed an interest in doing this. There's been some discussion around as the city returns to posting camps, whether that then requires there to be additional sites. We don't have any specific ones in mind at this point. There are real costs associated with operating even those sites that have relatively minimal infrastructure. So as always, unfortunately, we're having to also balance kind of the resources that we have available to us to do the work. But I do think that there's a lot of interest and some momentum towards having additional sites like this if they can demonstrate to serve their purpose well.
Anything else? I don't see anything else in the chat. Other folks on the call have questions?
That I've seen. Ashley Henry from Business for a Better Portland is asking, is the resupply center seeking supply donations, or would you recommending directing those elsewhere?
We are definitely always happy to get donations into this site. So the location is 521 Southwest Washington, and it is open from 10 to noon and through 2:30 to 5, Monday through Friday. And the things that we're looking for there are, blankets, tarps, sleeping bags, tents. The sack lunch program is something, if you're interested, you can reach out to us directly and we can coordinate what that looks like. We've got students around the city who are making sack lunches and contributing to that effort. So the answer is yes, and you can reach out to our office and we can give you some more detailed list of what kinds of donations are being requested right now.
Great. Also, Randy Miller is asking for an update on Wapato.
I don't have one. I know secondhand that there continues to be interest among some private sector folks in running a shelter program or a sort of recovery program using a partner from Astoria. I think they're calling it Bybee Lakes instead of Wapato now, but it's not a project that we're involved in at all right now.
Great. I see another question here, but this is probably better for Robert King. It's Benedict from Sheridan Fruit Company saying that starting tomorrow, customers are required to wear face coverings if they want to shop in the store, according to OHA. What if they refuse or become belligerent, violent?
Well, I think if it turns belligerent, if there's a nexus to health safety, then, I think the calling the non-emergency number or police would apply. With the governor's order, the Bureau's approach has been education. No one has been cited or arrested. I think the masks will probably fit into that same category. If a store owner wants to trespass somebody, or if a fight ensues, then there's a crime afoot, then it's appropriate to call police, and depending upon how serious the situation is, it's either non-emergency or 911. But I'm also thinking that the police bureau and officers are going to want to make sure that they conduct investigations thoroughly and document everything and respond. But I'm sure that their preference is going to be to de-escalate whatever situation they're in and resolve the matter without having to make arrests or use force unless someone is injured or some other more serious crime is occurring.
We have a question from Mark from Ashley Henry saying, what are predictions for an increase in homelessness after the eviction moratorium expires? She heard 40% by year end.
Yeah, so there's a study out of Columbia University that is looking at sort of national data and looking at the historic correlation between increases in unemployment and increases in homelessness. And the conclusion of that study is that if that historic pattern holds, and there isn't any reason to think it wouldn't, at least in the eyes of the academics that authored this, they're projecting an increase of 40 to 45% in homelessness nationally by the end of this calendar year. So what that's going to look like, I think, will vary by local community, and certainly not all local communities have the eviction moratorium. Multnomah County not only has the moratorium on the evictions, but also has the grace period to repay. And there is a lot of effort going in right now to generating rent assistance that will serve as sort of an emergency resource for low-income households that have accumulated debt and or have not yet sort of reestablished a foothold in the economy, so that they don't lose their housing. And the city of Portland has about $8 million in the mayor's budget. They're taking some of the additional federal CSBG money that's coming in for rent assistance. The county got about $10 million from the state e-board allocation to put towards rent assistance. And then there are discussions around other forms of CARES Act funding being used to do emergency rent assistance. So, the demand is going to be enormous. Those sound like a lot of dollars. The reality of how many people are going to be in financial straits and at risk of losing their housing, I don't think we fully know that at this point. But, I think we have to, we're certainly looking at this as needing to, stem the tide of new folks coming into homelessness, because the resources we have currently just for the folks who are already on our streets are so strapped. So It is a real risk. I think it will be a lot of people who are facing homelessness for the first time in our community. And it's going to take a big lift on everyone's part to try to prevent that from happening.
Just a question about the Here Together initiative and kind of the timing on that and who will be overseeing that for Multnomah County.
So our understanding from Metro is that the first tax collections will be in April, and it's a partial, and so it's going to take some time before the full amount of that Here Together funding comes available. But we will start to have some of that money in next fiscal year's budget, so in FY22. 21-22. Oversight of that, so the measure has an oversight body that Metro is going to create. There will be stakeholder advisory groups at the Metro level that will assist in oversight. Our local jurisdiction, the county, the joint office will provide some internal leadership in coalescing the various county departments that will be investing some of these dollars. So the health department, our aging and disabilities and veteran services division, joint office. So the kinds of services that Here Together anticipates funding in the community aren't just services that the joint office funds, but the joint office will provide leadership. We will spend the next 3 to 4 months developing a local implementation plan in partnership with community stakeholders. That local implementation plan has to get submitted to and approved by the Metro measure oversight body. And then once that's done, that will get incorporated into an intergovernmental agreement between Metro and Multnomah County that will ensure that the work that we're doing with the Here Together funds is aligned with that local implementation plan. So that's kind of the structure of it. All of that planning work has to happen over the next essentially 6 to 9 months so that we can get an intergovernmental agreement in place and be ready to push those dollars out into the community as soon as they're available.
We have Mark for another 10 minutes. If anyone has any more questions, Robert King had to take off. I did have a question about Portland street response, and I know that Kristen from Hardesty's office is on here. I'm not sure if she can speak to that or if you can speak to that, Mark, just about the timing and implementation or any ideas they have going forth.
Yeah, I can help answer some of those questions. Kristen Johnson, Financial Policy Advisor to Commissioner Hardesty. We just were awarded $4.8 million in ongoing funding in the adopted budget for Portland Street Response. The implementation has been put on hold with the COVID emergency, but we are working diligently now to get it up and running. And we still intend to start our initial team in Lentz, as we had said before. And so we are going to be working through what would a ramp up look like for the other teams. We believe we have funding for 6 teams. And so we have a lot to, well, first of all, to be clear, we still need to get some agreements with PFFA around the ramp up of the team. So right now we've got the go ahead to do the 1 team in Lentz. We're working through labor negotiations with the fire union. And then we have a lot of practical discussions to think about. So how do we want to ramp up? Do we want to do, a day and a night in Lentz? Do we want to have vehicles in different parts of the city? There's a lot of logistics to consider, but we are getting all of our training, everything squared away with the dispatchers and with the new hires once we get the job postings out, and then just procuring vehicles, etc. So we're trying really hard to get this live by the fall. It's going to take 3 or 4 months of training for the new hires, just on all of the technical coding, software, protocols, etc. once they get going. So no hard start date, but we're pushing really hard for fall.
Great. And that is basically the new program for having emergency mental health response by working with paramedics and mental health workers. So
correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Also, has there been any consideration for, maybe this could go to Mark as well, for more outreach on a continuous basis to those experiencing houselessness, so we don't arrive at these kind of emergency crises? We've actually been seeing a lot of progress just in what our outreach teams have been able to do. But has the Multnomah County been considering any more outreach workers on the ground?
So we don't have, well, a couple of answers to that. There is some resource in the Joint Office's proposed COVID-19 response budget to expand outreach, in particular culturally specific outreach, to some of the communities that are overrepresented in the unsheltered population. There is also, I think, an expectation that with Here Together, we will do some expanded outreach. That said, we do have a fair amount of outreach capacity, and the challenge for outreach teams continues to be answering the question of where the folks who they are engaging on outreach can go, if not on the sidewalks or in the parks. And so that brings us right back to the questions around shelter, but even more importantly, the housing that is the transition from shelter for people, so that we can free up space in the shelter capacity that we have. So, I think with Here Together, there will be a conversation, because the resources that will eventually come into this community are so significant, that it will be a discussion about, do we need more outreach? Do we need more shelter, or do we need more housing with which to better utilize the outreach and shelter capacity that we currently have? So that's what that local planning exercise will look like. I also think with the more expansive funding of Portland Street Response, while that isn't homeless outreach per se, it will be teams engaging many of the same people who our outreach teams currently engage, and I think there'll be an important conversation to have with PSR about their ability to access those scarce resources of shelter and housing in the system. So we're not planning any big expansions of outreach in the short term, but I think the role of outreach as it relates to PSR and as it relates to Here Together will definitely be on the table, and will always have to be coupled with, outreach is one piece, but we've got to be able to connect people to the resources to get them off the street, and what does that look like?
Any other questions for Mark while we have him?
I have a question. Mark, I know that your office doesn't have a legislative agenda, but I'm curious if the city is supportive of the extension of the eviction moratorium, as well as the proposed foreclosure moratorium on property owners that would address could potentially stem the tide of homelessness, as well as commercial evictions. Oh, you're on mute.
You're mute, Mark.
Sorry, I don't know the answer to that question. I don't know. Kristen may actually have more insight into where the city is in terms of those two legislative changes, or somebody else from city council, but I don't know the answer to that.
I can't speak for every office, but I can't imagine that anyone at the city would be against moratoriums on evictions.
If anybody would like to get that full email from me, let me know, because that is coming to a head tomorrow and at the special session, both the eviction moratorium and the foreclosure moratorium, and there are calls to action from both the Housing Alliance and United for Relief. I think some members of the CEIC are also active with United for Relief, like Eric Kress, right?
Yes, and we've been supporting Eric and started off a lot of those conversations too at the Central Eastside.
Mm-hmm. So. Okay, thanks.
Great. All right. Karl, do you want to lead us on to the next part of the
Yeah, well, a little bit. Marc, again, really appreciate having you here. I know you're incredibly busy, so appreciate you not just spending your time with us, but also providing such great and helpful information, being such a great leader of the not only your office, but the efforts citywide. It's such important work. So just thank you so much for all you've been doing.
Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, Karl. Thanks, Kate. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. So we're going to shift gears slightly. Let Marc go. Certainly those, if there are additional questions that have to do with houselessness or other things that Marc might have been able to answer and you just think of those later, please put them in the chat and we'll try and get them answered at a later time. I think we want to switch a little bit to aspects of not specifically focused on houselessness, but with actual business recovery of you operating your businesses. And I appreciated the early intros from individual owners. I think what we'd like to hear is probably some more of that, to hear about what issues you're having in opening your businesses. And, you know, we have a list of stuff here on the agenda, whether it's permitting or health regulations, physical improvements in the street and right of way, personal protective equipment. I know we have our peers here from the city's office or Bureau of Transportation. There are other folks here that represent various city offices that may have answers to your questions. So I don't think, Kate, we had anybody presenting in this section. Is that true?
No, we don't have anyone presenting.
Yeah. So I think we'd probably like to change the format slightly and just have people probably just chime in live rather than, you know, you can use both, continue using the chat, but also just chime in live here and talk about specific questions you have around your business. And folks who are on the call, sorry, I can't keep track of everybody who's here, but folks who are on the call who feel like it's their purview to answer, please chime in. So with that, I will open the floor and let folks ask their questions or make their statements about what's happening on the ground for them. And I'll see if there's other things in the chat.
Bridgid had in the chat a question again about the public restrooms and how to handle that.
Can the person asking that just say more about that question?
That was Bridgid from the beginning when she was talking about public restrooms. She doesn't have great internet, so.
Oh, okay.
Hi, Karl. I can just speak to that briefly. I need to also jump off the call here momentarily. So thank you, Kate and others, for hosting this and for the opportunity to join. If folks have any follow-up questions or concerns for the state, please don't hesitate to contact me. I included my contact information in the chat box. As for restrooms, I know that businesses aren't required, but are recommended to sort of assign a staff person to monitor restrooms to ensure that customers aren't congregating and that there's adequate physical distancing. Unfortunately, that's all the guidance that I know of for restrooms at this time, but I can certainly share your concern or desire for additional information or guidance on restrooms specifically. So.
Yeah, so I don't think thank you, Rihanna. Thank you for joining us too. And I know, just like Marc, you were working overtime, so we really appreciate having you here.
Thank you.
Yeah, so Sarah Allen, I don't know if she's on the call or somebody from the mayor's office is on the call. Sarah Allen has been a point person for better or worse, for public restrooms and sanitation in the city. There's a map that is available, I believe, through Portland Maps that shows public restrooms. There's been an effort I know from her and I think you heard this from Mark too, to have porta potties and hand washing stations. Those have increased significantly. I think there's a question too about what additional funding and where they're needed. I believe that the mayor's office is actively taking sort of requests or complaints about needing one in a particular location. So like I said, porta potties and hand washing stations have been deployed throughout the city in a greater number than in the past. And I think the mayor's office is working to coordinate that. I would also say there has been some initial discussion in Old Town about a potential loo there, or loo or more loos. So that, I don't know if that's come up here in Central Eastside, but certainly discussion.
Yeah, we've had many talks. There actually are very few public bathrooms in the Central East Side. And the loos have been a challenge because they get a lot of things thrown into them and start malfunctioning. So we've also had talks about having attended bathrooms. It would be great to have an investment in bathrooms. That's definitely something that we're seeing as a big problem in the Central East Side. We did have Nada. I think I saw your hand up. Nada Maisse.
Yeah, hello everyone. I'm the owner of Gourmet Coffee Brewmaster. We deliver freshly brewed coffee, hot and cold beverages, and food to events. And I know people are not coming back to offices anytime soon. If they are, when do you expect this to come back? And if there is a time frame to work around it?
This is Jessica from Multnomah County. I can answer some of that if you'd like.
Please.
Some nodding heads. That means people can hear me. I'm never sure. That's a great question, and one that I think some of the messaging misses sometimes in phase one. Yeah, teleworking is strongly recommended in phase one of reopening. The recommendation for teleworking continues into phase two as well. So that's going to be an important part of prevention efforts. That doesn't mean that everybody is going to do it. There are, ways that you can plan for safe physical distancing. We're grappling with that as an employer ourselves at Multnomah County, but it is recommended in phase one and then going into phase two. And just to make sure folks know, we're now moving as a region in applying for phase two. Originally, when the state had counties create a reopening plan and apply to reopen, one of the things that they had were counties applying individually. But because of how people, live, work, pray, and play across different counties, we are seeing disease transmission across county lines, which are somewhat artificial to viruses. So we have to move as a region now, which means that we will apply for phase two with Clackamas and Washington County, and we cannot apply for phase two any sooner than 3 weeks from last Friday.
Had some concerns from businesses just about the rollouts of phasing, and so we're wondering kind of what that would look like in the future in terms of communication with the county.
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question? I could not hear that.
Sorry, we've had concerns from businesses about how the rollout communications played out. And we're wondering how it would be addressed in the future as we go into different phases, just in terms of communications.
Yeah, I can fully appreciate the choppy communications between June 5th and June 12th around entering phase one for businesses.
I think the goal is to be much more ahead of the curve and talking about this proactively as we get closer to a phase 2 application. What we're seeing right now with disease transmission, as I'm sure you all have seen or read in the news, is that we are seeing spikes in cases, which we expect. The goal right now is not disease suppression. COVID-19 is here. It is going to spread. What we're really trying to do is minimize impact on vulnerable populations and spread out how it is spread so that it's slower and it creates less pressure on the healthcare system. But that's something we're really aware of in terms of early and transparent communications. And the first round of communications in phase 1 was less than ideal. So we want to be communicating along the way about what we're seeing and what we can expect, knowing that, one, we're seeing, disease transmission spike. We're also seeing, different patterns in different counties. So we'll be communicating with folks, regularly to make sure they have the information that they need, and hopefully with much more advanced notice around entering phase 2. That's our goal. We know that it was very disruptive for folks to find out at the 9th hour that things were not opening as we thought.
There is a question from Grant from OMSI. Are there any plans for how to improve the aesthetics of the area? Quite a few buildings that are shut down have had a lot of graffiti and vandalism. We are actually working on this, and I can have Adrian and Nyla speak to that. Adrian is our program manager, and we'll talk to you about how we've been working with graffiti. And then also Nyla can talk about some of the cleanups that we are having in the area. So.
Yeah, and hello everyone. Grant is on our oversight committee as well. So thank you for the question, Grant. I think, our graffiti team is trying to keep up as best as it can and also be, really respectful of also some of the protest graffiti and the memorials to George Floyd, addressing, prioritizing hate graffiti as well as along high corridors, which is part of our priority all the time. And we're working closely with the Office of Civic and Community Life's graffiti removal program to ensure that the city is matching the enhanced service district graffiti, the quantity that is just kind of overwhelming everyone. We really are encouraging people to kind of establish their own hubs to address graffiti. So in the absence of larger graffiti removal events, a business can get supplies from the Office of Civic Life and have those present on site to encourage kind of their neighbors to participate in a little bit more grassroots, localized cleanup efforts. But we are having a Pick It Up Portland event, and we're meeting today with several community partners. Nyla, do you want to speak to the Pick It Up Portland?
Yes, as soon as I take myself off mute. So we have our Pick It Up Portland, which Pick It Up Portland is an event that happens every year. The mayor puts it on. It typically happens in June, but it is now going to be happening middle of July. We're working with Solve on that. And like Adrian said, a few other partners to put that together. Solve is also, if anybody's interested, doing a lot of grassroots small neighborhood cleanups, not just in the Central Eastside, but around the greater Portland area as well, a lot downtown. So if anybody's interested, I would encourage you to check out their website, as well as Our Streets PDX is another group that has been doing some graffiti removal. So there's been a lot of groups kind of doing this. The other thing that we have going on is PSAA is doing their viaducts murals, which I highly encourage you to go and check those out if you have not already. Central Eastside was able to financially support a few of the murals that are happening down there. And then, yes, Bridgid, just like you're saying, I was going to sort of pass it off to Amy as well. If you, Amy, want to talk about the Prosper Portland Repair Grant, which is another program that I think people can tap into.
Sure. So good morning, everybody. My name is Amy Nagy. I'm a project manager in the development department at Prosper Portland, and work closely with the folks in Central Eastside. So it's good to see you guys. We have a couple of financial programs, I think, that will be supportive of this, particularly for building owners who are experiencing some of the physical impacts. So we have launched the Repair and Reopening Grant, and this is something that is what's called TIF restricted. So Prosper Portland deploys funds through tax increment financing districts. Very wonky. Central Eastside is one of those, just know that. And we have funds available then to support both the repair of buildings, so replacement of windows, doors, graffiti repair, etc., as well as the reopening. So as people are looking to kind of what Bridgid was talking about, just making some of those physical changes, we can support that as well. We did just close the repair portion. We supported just over 20 businesses in Central Eastside with small grants on that. And in the next couple of weeks, we'll be doing the reopening, but you could still use them for a repair type purpose. I will also flag that we're working right now with City Council on some of the CARES funds and are hoping to receive an allocation of that to move through what we called our Small Business Relief Fund. And that was something that we launched right as the COVID crisis was getting underway in order to support businesses who were experiencing the immediate impacts of the public health and safety requirements. And so that goes to supporting covering payroll, physical improvements, health benefits, now could be used for PPE, etc. So we are working on getting that structured. So when and if an allocation comes through, we'll be able to deploy that. And I would say one last thing is, and Bridget, I'm so glad you had brought this up, just in terms of kind of signage and a consistent look. Prosper Portland, in partnership with the county, has developed a series of materials that can be used both like as digital assets as well as those that can be printed, that start to talk about business practices and what folks are doing in order to build that kind of customer confidence. And so you're able, I'm going to go ahead and put the link right here in the chat, but if you click on it, they're all free to use and they're very straightforward. We see this as kind of an evolving effort. So as either as new guidelines come through or things change, we'll be able to update those. But you can download them. It just says we're practicing, we're practicing kind of safe public safety or health business safety by washing our hands. Please wear gloves. Please wear masks. So there's a series of those assets that you can see and have access to. And ideally, what we would be doing is then sort of starting to kind of ramp that up so people are seeing a consistent look as to what kind of Bridgid from Cargo was flagging earlier. And as you start to recognize those signs, you know that businesses are starting to instill some of those practices to give customers the confidence to come on in and shop. And also be used even for employees as well as just a nice gentle reminder of instilling those kind of safety practices. So I'm going to put that in the chat right now. If you have more questions on any of the financial programs, you can absolutely contact me directly, or there's my son, sorry. You can absolutely contact me directly, or you can also look on the Prosper Portland website, and we have a COVID-19 response that's all dedicated to small businesses and providing all those resources.
Great. Emery, I saw your comment that you had done a great mural on the boards in front of your business. Your business is Wild Shaman. I also saw that you had a comment a little bit earlier, so if you have anything you want to add.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Hi everyone. I had a comment about the 7-Eleven on the Southeast Grand Avenue, which is a source of problems that we've been experiencing for the last 3 years. We were located on Southeast 6th and Yamhill, and we moved on to Grand Avenue in March. They just, I don't know if there's any way to warn them or stop them selling cheap booze to houseless people, because that creates a lot of problem, and that creates a route for them to hang out there, then get super drunk and create issues. You know, we keep our doors locked since day one for the last 3 years. We never had our doors unlocked. We had a couple of occasions that we felt unsafe. We had lots of calls to police and all that, and Our neighbor opposite the street, Andy, the owner of the Showground building, he's also very aware of what's going on. It's just I'm wondering how to control that issue to conduct a safe business, because keeping doors unlocked, locked all the time, and now we've been boarded up for the last 3 weeks. We can't see who's out there, who wants to come in, who wants to, just wandering around. We have a ring bell at the door. It helps kinda, but it's just the overall, how can we make that 7-Eleven under more control of selling cheap booze to houseless people?
I don't know if there's anybody on this call now that can answer that question immediately.
You can definitely bring that up with Robert King.
Yeah, I think he dropped off, right?
Yeah, so I can follow up, Emery.
Okay. Yeah, Emery, the only thing I said is the only thing I think I know about it is that there has been success for other specific 7-Eleven locations for them to either remove booze altogether or just to reduce it somehow. So I think it's possible. I just don't have any details about how it works.
Yeah, some business owners, we talked to them a couple of times, warned them, but it seems like they really don't care much. They know the issue, but they don't really, I think, control it as much.
And they utilize our safety for all services extensively. That's it's definitely a hot spot, your area. So our safety ambassadors are constantly going around there. But, as you're saying, there's only so much we can do to navigate that before the business has to address some of the issues as well.
Yeah, I know. I mean, the safety program that CEIC provides, it's good. We've been in contact with the safety ambassadors. I know Christian, he stops time to time. I talk to him. I mean, the services you guys provide are amazing. The graffiti removal and all that. We're so happy with that for sure. But I know there's a lot of characters in the neighborhood that we have to do. We got our windows smashed on 15th of May because someone was super high on something, decided to smash all our windows. So, neighborhood is hot, but,
Since we have Art Pierce on the call, I got a call yesterday about just a business not aware of the free permits. So just how can we help you in getting just the outreach out there and the message out there? And well, maybe you could just give a plug right now, Art, about
Sure. I'll do that, and I can I'll quickly post a link to our webpage as well. So hopefully everyone knows that for this summer, as part of our COVID response, PBOT is offering street use permits at no charge for this season. So now through November, for businesses to expand their use into the right of way. So that could be retail uses, that could be service uses, or restaurants, those types of activities. Hopefully you've seen them starting to appear around the city over the last week. So we have some early participants, and we essentially have a whole toolkit ready to help you walk through the process, and staff that are ready to work through the process. The very easy proposal would be to use a parking space in front of your business. That's relatively quick. And then there are businesses that are pursuing side street closures, as well as main street closures for plazas over the course of the summer. So there's a lot of work underway with various business districts. Some early ones in St. John's have been a really great success. So we welcome you if you feel like you need more space to be able to restore your business level. We'd really like to see how the right of way can be of use to that. Any questions or thoughts on that? Maybe that spurs some more thought.
just got the link to, there's an active map of where you've already given permits, so we'll put that up.
Yep.
Let's find it.
Anyone have any experience with the program so far? I know that there are some applications within sort of along some of the key commercial corridors within the Central Eastside.
Nope. Okay. Well,
okay.
Here, I'm going to put this in the chat so everybody sees the link to for the program, and the map is available there as well on that Safe Streets. Okay, great. Also, I wanted to plug while we have Tyler Bump here. Tyler Bump from Eco Northwest actually is going to be speaking about economic forecasts. And Tyler actually knows many of us in the Central Eastside from the work on the Central City to the 2035 plan. We are going to be hosting him tomorrow at 9 a.m. And Nyla just put the RSVP in there. So we encourage you to join us then. Any other questions that you might have about transportation? I think one of the things that we are concerned about is just some of the messaging and around taking public transit, and what is PBOT thinking about really ensuring just trust in the public transport when we're trying to get people back to work.
Sure, I can speak to that. We did just receive some CARES Act funding through the city deliberations on that to do a mobility campaign. So we'll be producing some messaging and working with TriMet and Portland Streetcar on sort of so what, how to safely use transit in the coming weeks and months. So I think more information to come, and certainly we continue to want to encourage folks to make use of transit as well as cycling and walking to make sure that we have enough space on the streets for everyone to get around. If everyone goes back to driving, we're going to see congestion like we have not seen before.
And Adrian, you might want to just outline some of the transportation incentives that we are offering right now, if you have.
Sure, I can send a link to our transportation demand management programs, which include the transportation wallet that's managed with Sarah Goforth. That's a package of different services, including $250 credit for TriMet, which was in response to recognizing the need for folks who may not use Bike Town as frequently, but that there's also Bike Town credit and streetcar credit. So I can put a link to that in the chat box. We also have a low income wallet that's available for folks living on low incomes that's free. It's a transportation wallet that's free. So we're working really closely with the affordable housing in our district and a lot of the social services. And then we also have the Central Eastside Commuter Pass, which is a really amazing deal. It's a subsidized hop pass through TriMet that's $17 a month for a monthly pass for 6 months. And we saw a huge interest in the beginning. We completely sold out, and that obviously has petered down. So we're trying to be really flexible with people. But our Transportation and Parking Advisory Committee, which also meets tomorrow, if you want to come to another CEIC meeting, is deciding the budget for the next year and trying to figure out, which programs to prioritize moving forward. So it's always something that you can get involved with.
Great. I will say that I'm going to play a role of timekeeper here and say we have just a couple more minutes left. We're going to need to wrap up at 10:30 for technical reasons, it seems like. So if there's any sort of last minute burning questions, this is your moment. So we'll give a few seconds for people to shout out here. Any hands raised or questions in the chat? Okay, seeing none. I'm going to say just we are very, very grateful for, we at Prosper Portland, Amy and I in particular, are very, very grateful to have you all here today. This really helpful conversation. I'd say in terms of next steps with us, Amy and I will follow up with Kate and Nyla and Adrian and of the leadership at CEIC to sort of debrief from today, talk about if there are next steps specifically. There's some follow-up items that came either in the chat or questions that got raised. We have a recording of the meeting. We're also going to save the chat. And I think Kate, at least you and maybe Amy, I think there was a couple things that we need follow up on that we just couldn't answer in today's call. So potentially getting back to folks on this call about answers to those questions as well. So I know that's one follow-up item. We are again grateful to have you all here, and we're happy to continue both participating with you in a sort of regular role, but also in this extended role as hosting meetings or co-hosting meetings. So thank you all again. And Kate, I'll turn it back to you just for any closing remarks.
Well, thank you so much, Karl and Amy, for helping to organize this and hosting this. It's really helpful for our members. And I just want to thank all of our officials that also spoke today. And just, I urge you to join us again tomorrow, same time, well, not same place, but Zoom. And we will be discussing kind of our future going forward again with Tyler Bump, who has actually done a whole survey of our district that we were working on for a parking plan, parking and transportation plan. So just urge you to come back here and we'll see you soon. Thank you. And please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We're here to help you.